Hello and welcome to the TFF podcast by Fantasy Football Hub, our second episode of the 2021 season as we talk all things Telegraph fantasy football. What a start to the season it has been. Goals galore, drama, penalties, the top four underperforming with a lot of other teams overperforming. All in all, a recipe for potential disaster for all our well-laid pre-season fantasy plans. My name is Andrew and I'm joined as usual by two superb Telegraph fantasy managers. Firstly, Luke Wilson, how has your Telegraph season started out?
Perfectly happy, I think. About 18k. Not used many transfers. Transfers I've made are for long-term moves anyway. So, yeah, fine. Not spectacular, but fine.
Good work. And we have the Hub's resident statistician, Carl Weeks. Welcome, Carl. What an absolute feast of football. But it doesn't really lend itself to traditional TFF management, does it? Or does it for you, Carl?
Hiya. No, it doesn't lend itself to traditional stats, but it's just part of the variance we see in life, and hopefully it will get back to normal.
Guys are very calm. I've come on and I'm very disillusioned and very cross and very stressed about my team because we made all these wonderful 5-4-1 teams at the start of the season and we were so focused on that and it's just gone completely the other way, but we'll touch on that now. For our YouTube watchers, if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button bottom right hand corner of the screen to show you don't miss anything. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content, and don't forget to download our new app, which includes everything our website offers. Just search Fantasy Football Hub from wherever you get your apps. So for this podcast, we'll firstly have a look at what the data is telling us, followed by trying to unravel our thinking and try to work out what our next move should be for the coming weeks and potentially an adapted strategy for the remainder of the season. Thanks so much as ever for the questions we've had of our Twitter followers. We will answer them throughout the podcast as we go through. We will also look at our teams, any plans we may have, and look at the top of the Fantasy Football Hub members £200 prize mini league. So firstly, gents, what do we make of the football season so far? Luke, can I ask you first?
Thanks for coming to me first on this one. I don't know. It's I was talking about this the other day to someone, and the last 2 years have been a bit crazy at the start, because if you remember this time last year we were talking about an article I'd written where it was so predictable that we'd get loads of clean sheets and the big teams always started well and all of that, and the small teams sort of shut up shop, and that was ripped up 2 weeks last year. So I don't think it's actually that different from last year. I think there's the COVID banner being chucked over everything, and there's a risk. We shouldn't be doing internationals. This is just daft because this week is looking decimated as a result. But side thing, that's a little bugbear. I'm going on Dan's rant or something about that at the end if you really want me to. I think it will settle down. I think we predicted. I know me and you, Andrew, had a lot of Man City and Man United from the start, dodging week one, knowing we weren't going to do great. I mean, I think there are some predictable things in there. So I think Villa are a lot better than they were last year. So for this game, that's great for value. I think there's a few bargains that are already out there. I'm sure we'll touch on them. Man City won't keep losing. Liverpool won't lose 7-2 again to Villa. I think we've had some freak results, but Liverpool are still a good team. Man City are still a good team. Spurs have got 4-man fixtures, and United, I mean, if Bruno is playing nice with the others, whether he is or not, I don't know. But I think they'll all come good because they're just too good of players. So I think craziness will finish and we'll get a bit more normality between now and week 10. Return to the mean, I think.
Calming.
So I'm not panicking.
Calming words, mate. You've made me all mellow now because
I'll completely disagree with me now.
Quite a stressful few weeks. Carl, are you as mellow as Luke is?
It's been a very extraordinary start to the season. There's been lots of goals. Even before the absolute craziness of last weekend of 7 goals conceded by Liverpool, 6 goals at home by Man United, Spurs scoring 6. There was a lot of goals even to the weeks leading up to that. 4-3 Liverpool leads, and people are throwing around all sorts of theories about the reasons why. Is it all about pre-season? Is it like some of the clubs coming back a bit later than others, Man City and Man United. Being on the right players for the first 4 weeks has been near enough impossible. I do think about will it come back to revert back to the mean, as Luke sort of mentioned. I'm no expert, so what I tend to do is I think, what are the bookies doing? What are the spread bets doing? And actually, they haven't moved in terms of the expected goals over the whole weekend coming up. Is the same as what they would have had previously. So it's not like, and if they aren't shifting their view, I don't see poor bookies, so I'm not shifting my view on that either.
Very nice way to look at it, actually.
Yeah, I do agree with other things that Luke sort of said. You can start identifying some teams that are stronger, I think, now than what you would have thought pre-season. I must admit, I'm a big fan of Barclays. I thought, it's very tough at him being at Chelsea. Moving to Villa, I think has just made them such a strong team, plus their other recruits as well. Then you've seen Everton, the recruits that they've had and flying start. So that there are some player picks in there. One thing that I will mention, and there's a website I go to quite often, I think it's called 538, is it ranks all the teams in Europe. And I think Liverpool were second ranked behind Bayern Munich, or they may have been third behind Man City, but they've dropped several places over the first 4 weeks. And a lot of that's due to their defensive ratings being pushed downwards. So even though I think things will revert to the norm, I'm a bit more. I don't have the confidence in Liverpool's defence based on that external stats. I don't take too much just because he's conceded 7. That don't worry me. But if the people with knowledge sort of say their underlying performance is so poor that they've been downrated, then I would be wary of that.
I think really interesting. I think just to add from my view, but no, more from a TFF view, or the start of the season being talked to death and all sorts of past newspapers and things. I do think it's been. I do think a couple of the empty stadiums. I just think in terms of the atmosphere and the kind of urgency, packed stadium demands there. There's obviously teams aren't training together, plenty of fit, and also we've seen this massive increase in penalties, which particularly I think it was game week 2 or game week 3 when Vardy scored that hat-trick game week 3, I think it was. In that game week, I think Wilson scored a late penalty against Spurs. Vardy scored 2 penalties, whatever else, and but it's interesting because the handball I do think has been overstated. There's just been in penalties. In terms of the handball, that's not massively different to pre-season. It's just the fact that VAR is there, attackers get better, defenders have been sloppy. I mean, all the challenges at Leicester Man City, dreadful tackles in the area. So, I think that's been a contributing factor. But in terms of TFF, so it was actually just after that Leicester Man City game, I had a complete and utter meltdown. I was telling you before, it's the first time in I can't remember where I didn't know what to do and I completely panicked, and it was because the following game, which was Wolves, who I really fancied, I really wanted to get on Wolves, was starting like half an hour later. So I had half an hour to kind of think about what moves I wanted to actually make, and I ended up making 5 transfers in half an hour, which I've never done in my life. And I took out, Robertson and Alexander-Arnold. I took out some other players, put in some penalty takers. I'll show you my team later, but I basically was just like, got to get on penalty takers. So I put in Salah, which has worked out okay, obviously. I put in Click from Leeds. I put in Jimenez, who hasn't done nothing, and but the worst part was, what kind of happened when I took out Robertson and Alexander-Arnold and put in Salah, is that that following evening, Salah blanked and Alexander-Arnold assisted Robertson. So my 5 transfers immediately cost me about 15 points. But anyway, that was just a bit of an experience.
There you go, listeners. The advice is Don't panic, because otherwise you end up like Andrew.
Don't panic unless you do that. I think as well, though, just a few things that's going on in Telegraph, which hasn't happened, I think, in previous years, is we've never seen it, obviously, where games are happening one after the other. And obviously, the unique thing about the Telegraph is you can make transfers if you wanted to after every single game in the Premier League this season. Yes, sorry, not every single, but more or less. I think there was a few games last weekend before the international break was kicked off at the same time. But if you look at the games now for game week 5, game week 6, they are one after the other, I believe. And I think so. We'll pull up some ownership stats later, but I would like to think that a lot of managers are burning through their transfers for a couple of reasons. One, because the traditional setup of a TFF team just isn't working so far this season, and two, just because of all those extra opportunities, to actually make transfers, and potentially three as well. So all the high-owned players, which we'll touch on now, a lot of the high-owned players are not actually performing very well. So there's obviously that temptation there to take them out for the form players, such as Calvert-Lewin, Kane, Son, etc. Touching that now, I think my concern there, and we'll obviously touch on planning and strategy, and I think I probably see it a bit differently from you guys from just had pre-pod, but after game week 10, I don't want to have a team full of Everton, Villa, Newcastle, Palace, Leeds players. I think to Luke's point, we will see regression, slowly ease back into.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting one. So I've obviously we haven't got the precise stats, so we should reach out to the Telegraph and get that actually for number of average transfers. But
I have asked them
traditionally.
Actually.
Oh, they're just being mean. Come on, guys, give us the transfers. But traditionally they will track similar to the way the Sky game goes, particularly because you've got the same amount of transfers. Obviously, you haven't got the overhaul, so you'll probably see a little bit of an increase in Telegraph versus that now. So I that's why I have no care about rank, and I think Carl's the same. We just don't care about it. You might, because you're a fair way down, having burned 5 transfers. Sorry to get that one in, but I think it's very much if you've used less than sort of 4 or 5, most of the teams that are in the top 10k will have used close to 10 on average, and so I mean we know that the transfers are worth loads more once you get the FA Cup season. So yeah, I have no worries at all about position at this stage of the season. I wouldn't even look at it, especially if I was in your shoes, Andrew.
You're making me feel so much better, gents. Like I say, it's been a bit of a.
I feel like I'm taking the mick a little bit.
No, you're not. You're not, honestly,
am.
Because I've got to write about this every week and write about my performance of how I've made such a pig's ear of my team. But you guys have made me feel a bit better now. We are only, what are we, 4 game weeks in out of 38 plus FA Cup. We're probably less than 10% through games in the.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, because you were saying, by game week 10, you don't want to have a team full of Leeds and Villa and West Ham. I suspect I will.
Exactly.
I'm looking at the sub 3 mil category, and all of those teams tick the boxes to allow me to have Salah, KDB, Bruno, Kane, yada, 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 happy days. So if I've got 4 at the back who are all 2.8 million, they're going to be from those teams. I'm still not sold on your Meslier goalkeeper, because Telegraph, you need clean sheets. You don't get save points. So I'm still not sold on him. I know he's stupidly cheap, but...
Yeah, but obviously I was basing that. I was basing that by on getting Robertson, Alexander-Arnold, all the, as I say, traditional premium players.
Yeah.
But obviously they're not.
You've just got to have patience. We talked about this last time. Just get them, hold.
Patience. If I'd have left them both in and not had Salah last week, it would have been a 20-point swing, because I would have had -4 for each of those, and I would have missed out on Salah's 12. So I'd be 20 further points further behind. So let's have a look into the data and what it is telling us. So first up, with Carl's wonderful data extracts. Firstly, we have the top point scorers in each position. I'll just run through the top few in each. In goals, we've got Martinez, top point scorer with 20. Then we've got Fabianski, McCarthy, Allison, who's obviously out now for a while, and Patricio. In defence, Castagna, the Leicester fullback, is top. Creswell is second. Tyrone Mings third. Kurt Zuma fourth, and Konza fifth. Would you ever have thought that would be the top five?
One game less for the Villa boys as well.
Yeah,
so they've done that out of 3 games.
Really good point. In midfield, we've got Heung-min Son on 41 points, Salah on 36, Grealish on 30, as you've mentioned. He's only played 3 games, Grealish, but he's averaging 10 points a game at the moment. James Rodriguez, who of course has been absolutely fantastic. Jared Bowen, who I picked out at the start of the season, but didn't put in my team, on 23. So they're the midfielders. Top scoring strikers, Harry Kane, 41. Calvert-Lewin, who's been an absolute sensation, on 38. Jamie Vardy, 33. Penalty maestro, 0 XG, but scores the penalties. Mopai, 31, and Callum Wilson, 31. Interestingly, 4 out of those 5 take penalties there for their clubs. So firstly, Carl, what are your thoughts on those top scoring players? And do you expect the trends we've seen to continue in the next sort of 6, 8, 10 games?
I think the biggest point is it is 4 games, and over 4 games, any person who has the clean sheet and scores a goal is going to suddenly shoot up the rankings. And as Luke mentions, it's like Aston Villa, they've only played 3 games, but they've had 2 clean sheets. So all their players are near the top on the defensive side. Aston Villa had and Spurs 2 big scores, 7 and 6 goals, and again that lifts them high up. So I wouldn't take too much information from this and sort of say, "Oh, these players are going to continue," but I would use this information with anything else, as other information that you have around. So DCL, I would sort of say top of the rankings, cheapest price there, and Everton look like a good team this year. So therefore, I would look at that, and I'd also sort of just scan the list downwards and tend to look for cheap players, because we tend to know all the big hitters, Kane, Vardy, Salah, etc. You know they exist. You know they're going to perform over the season. What's key is what differentials or enablers are there that appear in this list that you may not have expected. So as you mentioned, Bowen, he's up there, and it's like, well, I wouldn't base any decisions going forward on this data, but it's like, is that person to keep your eye out on over the next 2 or 3 weeks before considering would you bring him in? But considering you want to keep your transfers back, I wouldn't rush into making those anyway. I don't know if you've seen the data, Luke, or if you've got any views on over there.
Yeah, I mean, in terms, and it's an interesting one. So what was going through my head while you were talking there, it still comes back, and it's something you said at the start, Andrew, about we're all shifting from 5-4-1 or 4-5-1. I'm not, and I think this is the thing. So right, do I think Calvert-Lewin is doing great, and do I think he's good value? Sort of, but Calvert-Lewin's 5.3, right, and Grealish is 4.6, and Bowen is 3.5. And actually, go to the defenders, like some of the defenders at sort of 2.7 million. If you kind of times that, you're still not the same. Well, you're at the same price, but you're getting more points. So and we were talking, I guess, a little bit about a pre-season article, which makes me think I need to do this for Telegraph. But there's a thing that I believe in called true points per value, which is where you take the base cost off of a certain player. And I know there's a couple of players in there that are sub 4 million, but in Telegraph, actually, it's very, very rare that a striker under 4 million does well. I mean, you've got Connolly there, he'll drop off. McGoldrick, he'll drop off. J.L. Adams, maybe. But if you factor in that I'm only ever going to be taking one, maybe two strikers, but realistically one, like how much better value is Kane going to be over DCL for that one slot? And I think Harry Kane at the end of the season, I may be wrong on this, but I think Harry Kane, if fit, and they're both fit, I think Harry Kane will be 40, 50 points ahead of him. So if you knock off that 3 million or 4 million off the base price, I'm going to get more for that extra money for that one slot. And I'd rather look at some of the value ones. And it will segue into the next slide in a second. But what's really appealing to me is the Villa boys, the West Ham boys. I also think Crystal Palace, there's a few players there that will offer good value. But this is the first time in a long, long time I'm actually drawn to the strikers, because normally I'll just go, well, I've got them in other formats, so I don't have to think about it, because I've always defence is best in Telegraph. But Calvert-Lewin intrigues me because of what Ancelotti's got him doing in that one-touch finishing. I think Callum Wilson's another one in there. He's fairly cheap, so actually you could go for a cheap Mopé as well. They're all lots cheaper, which could give you a midfield of Salah, Son, Bruno, KDB, Sterling, or Mane, and you get your three budget defenders and TAA, and you probably need Meslier in goal. You're never going to get clean sheet, in my opinion. I know you've got one, but I'll be wrong. This will be played back at me at the end of the season. You've got 15 clean sheets. I'll be like, oh my God. But I think it always comes back to the value, but there are so many good options. I mean, reading through the list, Kane, DCL, Vardy, Mopé, Wilson, Bamford, and maybe not. Ings, Jimenez. I know you're not so keen on him, but I think Jimenez has still got 4 good fixtures. Aubameyang, not the next 3, but he's class. And that's before we look at Werner or Abraham. One of those, whoever gets that Chelsea slot, is going to be good. So what's that? 10 good options. Yeah. I mean, last year I think we had 2.
What are your thoughts?
Like Vardy and Jimenez and Ings, wasn't it? But
what are your thoughts on Ollie Watkins at 4.4?
I'm reserving judgment. He looks good. I know Adam Hopcroft is really talking him up as a Villa fan. I mean, he's got that hat trick, but I mean that was. I mean, he's never going to do that again in his career against Liverpool. Let's be quite frank. I mean, how many people score hat tricks against the reigning champions? Very, very few. But he's good price, and if he lives up to the potential, I mean, he's one to monitor. And again, I mean, what price was he again? He's 4.3, is he?
4.4.
4.4. I mean, if you're playing that 4-5-1, that's a hell of a value, isn't it? If you're using that as the one slot, but it does mean you're going without Kane, DCL, Vardy, Wilson, Ings, or Aubameyang, all of those guys. It's like, I don't know, but yeah, one to monitor. I mean, those who've got him, if you've got him early, well played.
So we've just refiltered now on the graphic to show top points per million, and it doesn't actually change an awful lot in terms of goalkeepers and defenders. The one that shoots up in terms of midfield was Helder Costa for Leeds, the 3 million. I think it was largely based on that one performance he had, obviously 2 goals. He get an assist in that game as well. I'm not sure, but he shot up there. Also, Fornals for West Ham, we picked out at the start of then. Click for Leeds shoots up there as well. But in terms of the strikers, Calvert-Lewin goes to the top of the strikers in terms of points per million scorers. Bamford at 4.2 is, I know you kind of dismissed him, Luke, but I think he's actually looking pretty good, and he could have scored a few more. Mopé, Wilson, and then Kane, Watkins, Vardy and Ings. So this kind of Mopé, Wilson, Bamford, Calvert-Lewin thing you mentioned earlier, this kind of formation potentially having 2 or 3 of the cheap strikers supplemented by a more expensive midfielder, for example, could be something. Carl, in terms of points per million, does anyone reach out to you as interesting picks?
Well, you see a lot more unusual names in this list than you do in the previous list. Yeah. There's a couple of names that I'll pick out that have caught my eye previously. So Bamford, I may be a bit discriminatory here, but when he played for Palace, he was shit, and he was awful. And I can't imagine. And I remember when he was at Leeds, they were sort of saying, like last year in the Championship, he missed loads of goals. So as far as I'm concerned, it's probably like more luck.
He scored a few as well, though,
ability.
didn't he?
Well, no, but if you, crikey, even a blind squirrel finds a nut or something. I can't remember what the saying goes, but it's like, yeah, it's so.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe I've just got that inherent with me. But on the same grains, I've seen Grealish and Barkley that have come down to Sellers Park, and I think they've looked class. Grealish was like when they was last in the Premiership before. I thought he looked fantastic on the ball. But Watkins is a very interesting one. And I've got an interest in him, not because he scored a hat trick, which itself was, it's quite rare, and you wouldn't expect that to happen again, and looks perfectly right. But on XG, I think if I remember rightly, he's had 50% of the XG that Villa have had this season. And it's so no, that may just be variance because it's only 3 games. So you want to sort of like see how that continues. But that is very good for a striker. And obviously what tends to happen is if you're in a weaker side, you quite often see 30, 40% in the striker, but they don't score enough goals. But he's maybe in that sort of class that there's going to be enough, he's going to be the focal point. And therefore, he's someone I'm quite interested in going forward, and it frees up cash. So I've always been a big advocate of players at the back. But this year, because of the way the price points are, and there's some cheaper forwards, you may see in my team 2, maybe 3 strikers at some stage.
Oh, it's also worth mentioning, and we'll look at the fixture ticker in a little bit. Aston Villa are top of the fixture ticker for the next 10 games from an attacking perspective.
Right, I'm going to play devil's advocate though, right? So Ollie Watkins has got 24 points, right? Konsa at 2.7 has got 20. So that's great. He scored a hat trick and a couple of other goals, I think. But his mate playing at the back for half the price has got 4 points less.
Over the next 10 games, do you think it's more likely Konsa to keep more clean sheets than Watkins to get goal and assists?
Not necessarily, but Konsa and Mings are both goal threats as well. So I mean, and I think so. I may well be wrong, but I think Villa have invested really, really well. I think they've got a quality keeper in Martinez. Really good shot stopper. Mings was good anyway, bit injury prone. Konsa's a good signing. So I think they're going to be tighter. And if you think that their midfield 3, so this is why I sort of probably gear more to the defence because of the price predominantly. But they, you've got Grealish who scores. You've got Barkley that's gone there, and I'm trying, my mind's gone blank. The Scottish guy that's there as well, McGinn, who's I mean, if you bear in mind at the start of last season, McGinn was the furthest forward. Grealish was playing further deeper. So you've got 3 very attacking midfielders there who will weigh in with goals, which means between those 3 and Watkins, the goals are going to get shared around. Watkins probably will outscore them, but he needs to score double the points of Konsa on a value game. And this is a value game. So will he score, let's say the defenders are going to get 30 points over the next 10 weeks. Will he score 60? I doubt it.
Yeah, and if we just do a direct comparison you just did with Konsa's points per million is 7.4, Watkins is 5.5. Watkins had 3 goals and an assist last game. Obviously, with Watkins, he did score 20 points last week. I was 24 as well. He did actually blank in the 2.
Yeah, one other player that sort of caught my eye a little bit. So I think that they're very valid points that's been made, by the way, in terms of concept about. But there's no reason why you can't have more than one value pick. Especially you can have a value forward, a value defender. It's how many value defenders are you going to have? And also, as I sort of said at the beginning, this is very data is very volatile because of the very few games. So Konsa, I think he may have scored a goal and 2 clean sheets. How often are you going to get that from a defender, especially one from outside the top teams? No, there's no reason why you don't have both. But when I was looking at what I quite often do, especially in, say, another 4 weeks when the data's a bit more robust, as I'd sort of say, I'd start looking down these lists. And one player, I wouldn't have caught my eye, but it was in the headlines. Is it that chap who went from West Ham to West Brom? Dingana?
Dingana, yeah.
2.3. And, he's an attacking midfielder. And talking about value, you'd imagine he'd be playing all the time. He'd be chipping in at 2.3. It frees up a lot of money. So I would be looking at those. However, because I think more of the money should be shifted towards midfield and strikers, I'm a bit, I can't, it'd be taking up a midfielder slot, if you know what I mean. Right. I wouldn't be able to have the Salah, the Sons, the Grealishes, the KVB and all that. That's all those players. But if I was playing like last year when I had all my money at the back, then it would be fantastic to slot into the team.
I tell you so take out the goalkeepers, right? But I think the player that is the most underpriced given the team he plays for is Gabriel at Arsenal. So 2.8 million goal threat, like that. Arsenal are not the Arsenal they were under previous management. They are good, but the next 3 games are horrible for them. But then they go on a really good run. I mean, I would be shocked if he's not in the top 5 value for defenders at 2.8 million in that team. And they given them playing 3 at the back, they are going to be fairly solid, I think, compared to previous years. And Sace is probably the other one at 2.9. Wolves look good at the back, and that's a very inviting price, in my opinion.
So our final image for looking back so far at the first 4 weeks shows the current player ownership levels and also the highest scoring points by team. So I didn't send this slide to the 2 guys. I wanted to give them a little bit of a quiz to see what they think. So I'll go one by one. Luke, who do you think is the highest owned player in the game? You better not have the stats up on your screen. Who do you think is the highest?
I haven't.
Good. Okay. Who do you think is the highest owned player?
Right. It's whether there's been flurry of transfers. So pre-season, it was probably Salah, KDB, or Trent. And I don't think it will have changed. Son or Kane may well have come in, but they're quite expensive. So I'm going to say TAA.
Okay, it's a pretty reasonable shout there. What about you, Carl? Who do you think are kind of in the top 3 or 4 in terms of ownership?
I agree with Luke in terms of pre-season. I'd have gone for Salah or TAA. I think that a lot of people would have jumped on to the Man United players. So I think Bruno. I think there will be a reaction to Villa and Spurs, but I think any transfers, those ones will come this coming week. People jumping on people like Kane, and therefore I will go for Bruno.
Okay. The highest owned player with 36%, which was much lower than last year. I don't know if you remember, we had like Sterling was owned by like 55% or something stupid, and Alexander-Arnold was in the 40s or 50s as well. 36%, which just shows the kind of spread of players, is Kevin De Bruyne is 36% owned. Second is Mo Salah, 35%. Aubameyang is still the 3rd highest owned player, which 31%. Alexander-Arnold is also 31%. Timo Werner is still owned by 31%.
I think what we've established is 31% of the game are dead teams already.
Well, maybe. Mason Greenwood, 25%. Harry Kane, 24%. Bruno, 23%. Calvert-Lewin, 22%. Phil Foden, 20%. Doherty, 18%, Ings 18%. And do you know what? This to me is absolute music to my ears, because it means that in terms of the masses, I haven't been, because a lot of these are the kind of players which I started with, or I still got, a lot of these sorts of players. Is I was really concerned that players like Vardy, Calvert-Lewin, Kane, all the ones who've been absolutely smashing it right at the top, but they're not. So that's kind of interesting there. In terms of the teams then who have scored the most TFF points, the whole teams, who do you think are in the top 3 so far for the teams? Carl, I'll come to you first this time.
Well, I'd guess Aston Villa, considering the tables we've seen with their defenders and scoring 7 goals.
Okay.
So I'd go Villa. God, who's had clean sheets? Has anybody had a clean sheet except for Aston Villa?
A couple have had a couple, but not many.
Wow. Maybe Spurs, because they banged in 6 and didn't they score quite a few against Southampton, so they must be quite close.
Okay.
And West Ham.
Okay. And how about you, Luke? Who do you think are the top 3 scoring TFF teams?
Based on the value, Villa have got to be up there. Spurs, Son and Kane on their own have got close to 100 points. So Spurs are there. Everton, I would say.
Yep, so Everton are top. They've got 206 TFF points, with Calvert-Lewin being their highest scorer. West Ham are second, 195 points. Jared Bowen is their top scorer. Aston Villa are third, Tottenham behind. Arsenal, interestingly, are fifth, with Lacazette being their top scoring player.
Had a few clean sheets though, haven't they? So
Manchester City are 18th out of 20, which, even though they played a game less, is absolutely staggering, because they're normally top, right? Or at least second, if not top. So we can only hope for some regression there. There's a very concerned De Bruyne and Foden owner. But no, I thought it was really interesting in terms of the ownership level. There's still awful lot of highly owned players there who are not performing. And I think, to Carl's point, it'll be interesting now, and I think I touched on it earlier. It's going to be interesting to see how many people pile into Everton, Villa, West Ham, Spurs, all the teams we've just been to, all the informed teams. So my question is, are these teams going to be in form in a month's time? Because one is to start taking out potential. I see the 2 definite, the cornerstones of any TFF team being De Bruyne and Alexander. For me, they are. I say that I took Alexander Arnold out in my panic a couple of weeks ago, but any kind of advice I would ever give to anyone around TFF, De Bruyne and Alexander Arnold, leave them in. I just had a bit of a meltdown. I'll be getting back in soon. I've got no doubt. But there's a massive spread in variance in terms of the rest. But I don't think you want to be packing your team these players, because our next podcast is going to be very likely in the next international break after, will that be game week 8 or something like that? We could be looking at very, very different numbers here. Man City are 18th now. I would expect them to be top 6 or 8 considering that they've had there. So now we understand what's happened in the first 4 game weeks of the season. The killer question now is, what do we do moving forward? We now have a graphic showing the optimum team for the season so far, which is really interesting, which Carl will turn through now. And we've also had a question off Lee Williams. What looks like the optimal formation looking at 4 weeks of data? Well, Carl can run us through this exact question now and even give you the players as well as the formation. So, Carl, do you want to give us the optimum team following 4 game weeks worth of data?
Yeah, sure. On the slide itself, I've got last year's optimum team. So it was a 5-4-1, and then what I thought I'd do this time is, each time we have a podcast, I'll update it and keep it like a little mini time series to see how it changes over time. But several of the players we've sort of talked about and highlighted before. So this time it's a 3-4-3 formation. Is the optimum team. So we got 2 Villa defenders in Martinez in goal and Mings. Alongside them is Cresswell and Kurt Zouma from Chelsea. So that's a defence, and that's quite cheap. The most expensive one's to keep at 3.3 million. And this has allowed the midfield of being Son, Salah, Grealish, and Bowen. And then up front, you got DCL, Kane, and Morpie. Of course, a few goals, and you suddenly shoot up. So this will change going forward. But at the moment, that team would have netted you 324 points, and you would be sitting on top of the leaderboard with no transfers used.
Transfers used. But, you know, you just got to look at the difference in the profile of those teams between, you know, the Optimum team for last season, a 5-4-1, you know, Liverpool defenders, Sheffield United defenders, Man City midfielders, you know, which you would have kind of expected. The complete difference in the profile of the teams from quite stark. It's interesting actually because it was around this time last season when I did the first ever TFF cast, and I think actually I remember back now is that to kind of Luke's point, I was thinking this was a bit of a freaky kind of season, but I was making the point in that very first podcast that attackers were doing very well and defenders weren't, but not to be fooled by this because defenders always come good through the season. So I know we've seen all the goals. I hope for regression. I think it's the same. You know, I think we need to still, you know, look at this 3-4-3 formation. Will very likely not be the optimum formation at Christmas, and will certainly not be the optimum formation, I guess, at the end of the season, if we get any kind of regression. Saying that though, you know, with all the circumstances, no, we don't know what's going to happen, and especially if games. I tell you what will be interesting if games start to get postponed and are pushed later on in the season. It will be absolutely chaos with this because you'll have all sorts of probably 4-for-1s, 5-for-1s, maybe even Celtic. But yeah, hopefully, Lee, that answers your question there. And looking forward now, we have a graphic of the Hub's fixture ticker, which is filtered for the next 10 games, taking us up to game week 14. And we also had a question from FPL Vobinho. Due to the unpredictable nature of the season, how long do we wait until we make wholesale changes? So as I mentioned earlier, we've filtered on the next 10 games, and Aston Villa top with Crystal Palace, so they have the best 10 attacking fixtures next. Following that is Newcastle, then Brighton, then Man City, then West Brom, then Chelsea. Interestingly, few of the form teams that we've mentioned. So Everton are about 13th or 14th. West Ham are about 14th or 15th. Liverpool are underneath those, and Leeds. Then Spurs with Burnley, Arsenal, and Southampton right down the bottom. So in terms of those who look at fixtures for their next moves, as you're looking at, Villa, Palace, Brighton, Man City, Chelsea, potentially Leicester, the ones to have a look at for those. So, Luke, with these fixtures in mind and with everything we've just talked about, what is this kind of leading you to in terms of thinking about any plans you've got for your team for the next 8 or 10 weeks?
Yeah, it's actually backing up my plan. So I've only looked 6 games ahead, which is interesting. It's quite interesting to look at this view because Villa came up quite high on 6 games ahead as well. One caveat is ignore fixtures for Man United, Man City, and Liverpool. I don't care what fixtures they've got there. Just get them in if you can. But it comes back to the transfers at this stage of the season. I think I mentioned it on the previous one. My aim is to have used less than 10 by the new year. The transfers I will be making are either to get high performing, big name players like Kane is the one, I guess, vanity transfer I've done, but that was I think necessary with the form he's in. My other transfers will be to bring value players in that I think are going to be good. So I've bought in Lamptey at 2.5. I will be bringing a Villa player. It may actually be the keeper because I went for Ramsdale and I do not like the look of Sheffield United, and their fixture run is making me think actually that's even worse. So I might hold him for the Fulham game and then do the swap on the day for the evening game and bring somebody else in. I'm not sure about Leicester being a good fixture, but I think it probably will be Martinez. And then I think Sace is the other one that I'm looking at. So I think I will bring. I've got a Brighton defender, so that's reassuring. I will probably bring in a Villa player, and I will probably bring in a Wolves player, but that will just be for those three. Well, the keeper and the three value slots. I will be leaving TAA, and I will probably be leaving all of my midfield alone and my striker alone.
Okay, so obviously this takes us up then to game week 14, which is roughly around the start of December or going into December, I believe, because normally game week 19 is roughly around Boxing. So, to answer a few questions we've had this evening, are you still on track? Are you still confident we'll only use roughly 10 transfers by Christmas?
I think I will this year.
Wow,
I think I will. So if you work, I've made 3 transfers. One, well, both of them I see as long term. So I've brought in KDB and I've brought in Kane. Right. So KDB for Aubameyang was always my plan. So that's one of my planned transfers. The other, I can't remember who I took out, but I brought in Lamptey for. So I think that was Tierney when Tierney got injured. So I think it was anyway. But I know I dropped, so I've banked 500,000 to bring Lamptey because he's looking on fire. I know he might be slight injury dad, but I think he'll be good. But yeah, I'm earmarking 3 further transfers to make sure my goalkeeper and my 2 other budget defenders are, playing cheap budget players under 3 million. So there's 3 transfers there. And on that basis, that leaves me with 4 more transfers to do vanity. And I've got people like Greenwood who may be a problem. I'm not panicking yet. Foden may be a problem, not panicking yet. But I've got Bruno, I've got KDB, I've got Salah, I've got Kane. They're not going anywhere. I've got Trent. So I've got 5 players I'm not touching.
Yeah.
So it's really just getting those value ones, and then that sort of 3 to 4 million midfielder. I want to find a way of getting Son in. If I can do that, I will. But I don't think I'll find a way of doing it. But we'll see.
Hey, sounds like
So
you've got
panic.
a plan, Luke. You've got a plan, and you know what? It sounds very logical. And your performance of your team so far is backing it up and everything. That makes sense. I suppose my only concern is if you are bringing in the cheaper defenders and we do see a regression. I personally think across all fantasy formats that people are getting a bit too excited for Lamptey. So wonderful player. Do not get me wrong for 1 second, because he is one of the most exciting, refreshing young talents we've seen in a long time. But Brighton at the back are not good, and I think his points are a bit exaggerated because he won a couple of penalties. He's not going to do that. He's not going to win another probably 4 or 5 All. And so,
he's watch him play. He clocked the fastest sprint in Premier League history.
Yeah, we don't get points for that.
Yeah, but he's got an assist in every game he's played.
You don't get
no. You do get points for assists. He's basically a 2.5. Right, so wipe off the clean sheets. A 2.5 attacking midfielder in a team who scores goals with good fixtures if he stays fit. That's the question mark is if he's fit, but. He's 2.5 million. He's going to get more points than your goalkeeper at 2.1.
That sounds like a bet, but I'm not
going
there.
I'm going to get. I know your
bets.
betting history. Yes,
I need odds.
That does sound like a bet.
We'll have a chat after. I need odds on that one, I think. Anyway, moving on. Carl, what are your thoughts on the fixtures for the next 10? And are are any of your transfer decisions or not going to be based on these fixtures?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's fantastic seeing Palace top the league. I didn't think I'd ever see the day.
Yeah.
But knowing Roy, he'll probably play for 0-0s and hope to just nick Dodd goal.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure if I'd jump on, be as enthusiastic to get attacking players of Palace in. But in all seriousness, in terms of the question, I don't let the fixture ticker at this stage dictate transfers coming in and out. I'm in the same sort of camp, though in a slightly different field to Luke in terms of planning, and I definitely want to keep them to the back end. Where I will look at the ticker is like if I've got a change I decide to make in my team, it may be the timing of it. So when we sort of talked before about Watkins, if I decide that I'm going to bring him in, I may wait until after the Leicester game and think, oh, that's the perfect opportunity then. But I wouldn't go, oh, they've got good fixtures, I'm going to bring him in just to take him out again, like you would in other games. Because for TFL, I think it's, they're much more valuable later on. And therefore, to the question about the unpredictable nature of the season, I don't think that makes a difference. I think your strategy is the same, and it's just about keep saving your fixtures. And but when you are making the change, just trying to time it to the best of your ability.
I'm much more a fixtures person than you guys. I appreciate it's the first half of the season, and our advice is always, don't even worry about it. Just get to Christmas with a decent team and transfers in hand. But though, if you are thinking of bringing in Watkins, Grealish, whatever else, first off, Leicester away to me is it's not a bad fixture anyway. But after that, Villa's home games for the next 5. So 5 of their next 8 games are at home, and they're at home to Leeds, Southampton, Brighton, Newcastle, and Burnley. You could not ask probably for 5 better. And after that, they got West Brom away. They've got a couple of hardish away games, but in terms of those Villa fixtures, I think if you are going to look to get on Villa, have a look, because those home games are absolutely fantastic there. But I take your point, Carl. You're probably right. I like to bring up the fixture ticker because, to me, just as an example, you mentioned Arsenal's fixtures. Aubameyang, very popular. His fixtures over the next 10, are some of the worst. Southampton, Burnley. I mean, picked Phil Barsley in my team. It couldn't have gone any worse for that Barsley pick. But for me, looking at potentially Spurs, West Ham, and Everton. So I haven't got any Everton players, and it's very easy to get sucked into Calvert-Lewin, Rodriguez, especially Richarlison, Luka Dean. But I do kind of look at those fixtures. I do wonder whether they'll be able to sustain it. Don't get me wrong, Calvert-Lewin, he's at such a good price. I'm sure he'll prove really good value over the season. But Chelsea are 7th in that list. I've still got Werner in my team. Just an example. Don't ask me why, but I still got Werner in my team. But I'm quite happy, for example, to keep Werner in my team ahead of Calvert-Lewin, just with these fixtures in mind. Because I think that Werner is now more likely to push on. Hopefully now Pulisic is back, Ziyech will be back, may move up front now, and people are selling him in droves. It may, if Chelsea were lower down than Everton, I'd potentially look. But I think that that's kind of how we make it. But there's we've talked about Villa, Palace, Brighton, Man City up there as well. Man City's next 5 are not the best, but after that they really, really turn. And again, this is the thing. I don't think we should look at bringing in Everton, Villa, whatever for 5 games, taking out people like De Bruyne, potentially Foden, whatever else, just to be getting them back in again a few games. So I'm going around this a very long way, but I think I'm violently agreeing with you guys, just in terms of don't panic, stick to the plan. And I'm sure. So I've asked the Telegraph if I can have some transfer stats. I'm pretty sure. I agree with Luke. I'm pretty sure they will mirror or even more. I think they've spent even more, right? Because in Sky, your transfers are only per game day, whereas in Telegraph they're after every show. A lot of teams top 10k, for example, have used maybe even 15 transfers.
So if you're bringing in someone like Antonio, who's he's a beast across most of the fantasy games, I look at that ticker and go, Spurs, Man City, Liverpool. Yeah, I could bring him in this week, but I wouldn't. And he could score in all 3 games, but I would make the transfer after those 3. So the ticker is very valuable in getting your timing there.
The ticker, for those who are not members, this ticker is available on the website of members. It's dynamic in terms of you can filter it to whatever you want. We could have filtered this to 8 to 14 or 5 to 8 or 6 to 8 or 10 to 12 or whatever, and it gives you both from attacking view and defense view at that time. It's fantastic. It really helps. And just a quick plug. So Ian Parrin, of Sky planning fame has also made us now a Telegraph transfer planner as well for Fantasy Football Club members. Again, probably not as prevalent or as important in the first half of the season. Come January, that is going to be incredible of it, because it not only lets you see kind of when to bring them in, but it's the optimum time in terms of the transfers, or get them before a certain game, after a certain game, etc. So a quick plug for that as well for Hub members. So there are thoughts potentially what the fixtures mean for the next few weeks, and hopefully, Verbinho, we've answered your question in terms of don't be massively concerned over wholesale changes. I think those ownership stats have given me a lot of comfort as well in terms of a lot of those players, a lot of the ones I own, and a lot of those players. Aubameyang, for example, he's still one of the highest owned players of the game. Alexander-Arnold, the third or fourth highest owned. He's only got 7 points for the season. There's a lot of players in the same boat, so panic there. Carl, you've now got your optimum team, what the algorithm forecasts the next 10 weeks. So this is interesting. So this is what Carl's algorithm says are the players we should be looking at for the next 10 weeks. Carl, take it away.
Yeah, okay. Again, on the slide, I've got the team original from the start of the season. And then with all the data from the first 4 weeks, I've sort of fed in, obviously we've got different fixtures. I've looked at the next 10 game weeks and looked at the projections from the algorithm, and it's selected the team that's on the slide, and I'll just go through it. It's got Mendy in goal from Chelsea, Ake, James, Cascney from Leicester,
Yep.
and Saiss at Wolves. So you've got 4 at the back, with 3 in midfield of Salah, Rashford, and Antonio. And up front would be Vardy, Watkins, and Maupay. So it's shifted quite a bit from the original 5-4-1 to 4-3-3. And I find that a bit suspicious. Well, it's not suspicious, but I always want to know why things change, because if something's changed quite a bit, it's trying to dig down of what's caused it. And it's partly, I think, driven because of the ratings of teams have changed. So Liverpool, we had TAA in there previously, which took up quite a bit of the budget. It was a must stay in your eyes, but from the Liverpool's defensive rating has plummeted. So I think that's caused to free up quite a bit of money and therefore to shift a bit more up front. And I've already talked about Watkins having 50% of the XG. So it's sort of like they brought him on the radar because pre-season, I can't remember if he's there when we'd done this before, but if he was, we didn't have any stats on him. And now we've got some stats, it sort of pulled him out. One name that, well, sort of half interests me is Mendy in goal. So it's sort of saying he's value at that price. So that's quite cheap because he's cheaper than the Wolves goalkeeper. And you'd expect Chelsea to have more clean sheets. So when I've heard other pods sort of say he looked fantastic. I thought he looked a bit shaky when I saw him on TV. I thought he looked a little bit nervous for a goalkeeper. And Ake, I wouldn't trust because I'm not sure if he'll have a regular place. Of course, the algorithm doesn't know that. And Reece James, I was going to bring in myself, and I remember Luke sort of saying he's a absolutely fantastic player, but because he didn't play, I didn't bring him in. So again, it's more about game time, but he looks a fantastic player otherwise.
I stand by that. I mean, he's going to get back in because there's the injury for Chelsea left back, but yeah, it's a weird one because he still is their best player, Reece James, this season. Yeah. I challenge anyone to disagree with that so far this season. But so I'm dumbfounded that he didn't play the last game. Obviously, he's got a little temper on him based on the England game the other night. But
I agree with you, Luke. I think he's an absolutely fantastic. But I think the only thing is, Aspilicueta is also a fantastic player as well. If only they could have enough room in that defence to fit both in, but don't, do they?
Season's gone by. Chelsea's best performances when Aspi played on the right of a back three, and then they played wing backs.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, obviously
Indeed.
now that the midfielders are back, we may see a change of formation. We may, I'm hoping this coming weekend we see what Chelsea are going to be looking like for such an exciting team. Very excited to see them. We did have some questions around this. One was off who's got the kit. Normal season, one tries to keep transfers to New Year. Does this apply in this crazy year? So you guys, have obviously had pretty decent starts. I think you're pretty set. I've already used 5, which, oh my goodness, I can't even think about it. But I'm currently thinking, I currently haven't got any exact moves planned out. We'll touch on our teams in a bit, and we'll go through any kind of plans we've got. But I can see myself potentially having to do a little bit of surgery potentially. And as Luke said, it's always nice to have 2 or 3 transfers in the bank for a couple of vanity transfers as well. I think and for me at the moment, just because of the fact that I smashed up those 5 so early, completely changed the structure and look and feel of my team. Maybe 12 now, but I think again, don't think the advice is from here. The 2, don't panic. Just strategy. And Ian Parry, after such a bad start to season, I looked at Ian's team. He more or less picked the same 11 as I had, but he hasn't made any transfers. Got roughly the same 11 as I had. Is it worth treating the next week as an overhaul wildcard period and totally resetting my team? So I'm not sure about wildcard or overhaul, but potentially, I think you had double Liverpool defence. I think you've potentially still got players like Greenwood, maybe Bardsley. Just an example. These are the ones I shifted out a couple of weeks ago. May potentially, my advice would be maybe a little bit of surgery there, maybe 2 to 3 transfers to getting a couple of players you really, really want. Let's not forget this game is about having fun as well, right? It's not just about dreading looking at your teams and watching the games full of anguish and sadness. So they would be my thoughts there. What would your guys' thoughts be there? So Ian hasn't used any transfers. His team, is a very traditional, strong game week 1 team, but obviously it hasn't worked so far.
I'm just looking at his team now, right, and it is pretty similar. He's got Doherty. I don't think he's set, but I wouldn't shift TAA or Robertson because they're like wingers. So they're £4-5 million midfielders, so they're fine. He's got Tierney, so I don't know if he's still injured. He's flagged at the moment to be injured. So I think there's a couple of transfers. If you shifted Doherty down and maybe Tierney, but you could get down to sort of the 2.5, 2.8 million defenders. That's a chunk of change. He's got KDB, Havertz, Greenwood, Fernandes, Foden, and Werner. So Werner to Kane or DCL, and Greenwood and Foden up. I think with 5 transfers, he'd have a phenomenal team. I'd be tempted to possibly do 3 of those 5 transfers if the fixtures. Werner maybe hold, but I mean he's probably the key one to go. But see how he goes this weekend. But yeah, I think I wouldn't really be touching it. Doherty's got to go. That's the only one I'm saying do it. I just don't see that. Albeit Spurs have got good fixtures, but Aurier seems to have the position at the moment, based on what I've seen. But
that was a strange one though, because Aurier only played the last game against Man United. I wonder whether they had a plan for him versus Rashford. Maybe a bit of a strange one that was.
It was strange, but I mean, it might just be because I've been watching that Spurs documentary on Amazon, and Aurier looked phenomenal towards the end of last season. So I think that might be fresh in my head.
I'd personally hold on to Doherty. The next 4 games,
really nice. Yeah,
and then maybe you can get a bit more information. How often?
Werner to Kane, do that.
Can I just sort of say, even though I'm in the same sort of camp, I want to keep my transfers as much as possible until the new year. If you've had a bad start to the season, I think that's irrelevant. But I wouldn't say and sit here glum-faced, looking at my team and hating it. I've made, I think, 6 transfers, and I've got some more to go. Because if if you've made mistakes, or if you, in your own view, you've made mistakes, or there are players that you never saw to start with, bring them in. You make the transfers, but you're not doing it just because he's got 2 good fixtures. Bring him in, use transfers willy-nilly. It's all about getting your team set that you're happy with, that will go for a long period of time.
Long-term changes.
Yeah, it's for the improvement of the better. And if your view of Doherty's changed, then change your team. If it's a different player, change it. If I had 2 Liverpool defenders, I'd be looking, or 1 Liverpool defender, which I've got. I'm looking to shift out because my view has changed, and I'm not going to sit here and be stubborn. You've got to be flexible, but for the long term, not just for the whim.
I'm a fine one to preach this, but looking at, I think why he's posed the question is his defence got a grand total. 5 players got a grand total of -4 for him last week, which is probably what's motivating. I need to rip this up. Don't, I think, would be my view. It looks very nice on paper, your team.
I think the collective advice from this day between the 3 of us sounds like I'm saying make 3 changes. Luke is saying it's all right, maybe make 3 changes. Carl's saying make some changes, make you feel better. Just make those 3 odd changes to make, spruce your team up and get you excited for the game weeks, but don't make short-term, make moves that you want. Probably summary of there. Carl, we've now got your team on screen. Do you want to run through your team for our podcast listeners and give us a bit of insight into your thoughts and wisdom?
Sure. Okay. At the moment, I'm sitting with a 4-5-1 formation. In goal, I've got Patricio. The defence is Sias of Wolves, Robinson of Liverpool, Cascadine of Leicester, and Justin of Leicester. And then in midfield, I've got Salah, Greenwood, Bruno, Rashford, and Foden. And up front, I've got DCL. So I've also, on the slide, I've given the transfers that I've made. Some of these were like pre-planned in terms of Richarlison. I was only having there as a short term before I brought in the Man U players of Rashford and Bruno. One transfer was forced, which is Vinagre to Foden, because he got sort of shifted out. And Wayner up front, well, I thought he was going to be everybody here was thinking a bit of a steal, and I thought, fantastic, that's my one up front. And it's like, he hasn't produced the goods, and I haven't seen any of that. I'm never worried when somebody doesn't score a goal, but I'm worried if the stats say that he doesn't look like scoring a goal. And it may change, and I appreciate fully what's been sort of said about how he may move to being up top, and he may turn out to be good. But I look at my team now and I'm happy. Justin was a bit of an odd transfer, so I moved out Doherty, free up some funds, knowing that he's probably going to be short term. So I have some issues. So I've made 6 transfers, and when you had your blow up, I remember either reading it on Twitter or your article on the Hub, and I thought, oh, I don't have to feel so bad now, because I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm making 6 transfers, and you're sitting there smugly with your perfect team, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be miles behind. So at least you've made me feel better. But my plan,
all part of the service, Carl.
Thank you. But my plan is the longer term is Robinson's going to go, and I'm going to bring in a forward, either Watkins or Mapai, and at some stage Justin will go. Patricio may or may not go, depending on how much finances. I do like Wolves, but they've had quite a few turbulence in terms of the turnaround of players, so I'm not 100% sure. And for some reason, I'm getting a bit nervous about Foden. So it's like, I'm not sort of saying, no, I'm going to change it, or he's going to go out, but he's on my watch list. He's on the naughty step. He's got to behave himself and get banging a few goals. But
go for it, fine as a long-term pick.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that there are other players that I do quite enjoy, I think are quite good, and therefore it's like, well, should he be trumping them? So he's a great player, but will he score and do enough assists? I don't know. And so I'm monitoring, but shape-wise, I'm okay.
I'm only smiling to myself, and I'll play this back next month, right? I'll play this back when we have a podcast next month, and we've got teams full of. I can imagine us saying, "Why the fuck have I got a forward line of Ollie Watkins, Neil Mopai, and whoever else?" And we've taken out Phil Foden and Andy Robertson and wherever else. It seems a classic case of. I'm not talking about, sorry, Carl, specifically you and your team. Just the things we've been talking about. We've been talking about taking out Robertson. You just mentioned Foden there. The kind of players we're bringing in, Kinsmore Pie, wherever else. It does seem that classic setup of moving out proven top players who, over a season, will score a lot of points, or players who, at the moment, have scored points and are playing well. Will they continue to? I'm not so sure. It's really interesting to see where we'll be in a month's time.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's about just how do you distribute your finances. So it's like, I've got a lot of money in my midfield: Salah, Bruno, and Rashford. DCL's not cheap, and it's just about, is Robinson going to give that value? And under normal circumstances, I would probably leave him. But like I sort of mentioned earlier, Liverpool's defensive rating has plummeted, and based on that and values more up front, we will see come 4 weeks' time where we are.
Will. It's going to be really interesting. I'm really. It's going to be funny. I remember last time. I think it was on our first ever where we all did a podcast all together, and we were chuckling about potentially bringing in Danny Ings. And none of us did, and he absolutely smashed it for the rest of the season. It could
very nearly mentioned that earlier when we were talking about Ollie Watkins. That'll be my Danny Ings moment when I said, "Are you going to touch him?" Absolutely not. Definitely.
Danny Ings, are you having a laugh?
But to be fair, I think that's mainly because we have injury concerns about Ings rather than his ability.
Glass knees or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up on screen we have Luke's team. Luke, do you want to run through your very, very sexy looking team and tell us about any plans you have?
Is it? Okay, if you say so. I'm not looking at thinking that, really. So I'll start off with the most attractive player in my team, Ramsdale in goal. What a great pick that was at the start. So I think it's counteracted by a couple of the others, so I'm not too bad. But yeah, Ramsdale plays Fulham, and then he's gone because I think he's got 3 horrendous fixtures after that. I think he's got City, Liverpool, and one other big team. So he is gone. I've then got a back 4 of basically Trent and total budget. So Trent fine -4 last week. I've got Mitchell. So shout out to John Allison, so FPL lad. He's a Crystal Palace fan who, the night before the season start, me and him were having a bit of a debate over actual Sky budget picks, and then I spotted he was also equally budget picking this game. I went, brilliant. So I got him in all 3 formats in FPL, this and Sky. So I'm very happy with that.
He's going to have to go though now, right?
Well, is he? We don't know if PVA said I'm back, right? Fair enough. I love PVA's tweets, by the way. When he took on Katie Hopkins, that was my favourite all time. PVA, that was amazing. Anyway, side thing, but is he? I mean, he's not looked amazing, but he's PVA. Schlupp or PVA. It could come in there. Is PVA going to play 90 minutes? I mean, I'm going to see, and so I'm giving him this week. But I'm trying to remember the name. There's another guy who's Palace player who's going to be the right back, and who's
Ethan Ferguson.
But that's the one. So I know he's out. Nobody knows how long he's out, but I've kind of got him. I've got 500,000 in the bank at the moment as well, so I can go up to 2.6. So I've got quite a few options. So Mitchell, I'll see what the team's like. There's the beauty of the COVID game is that you can now see every team sheet, which is brilliant. So if he's not starting, I'll swap him for someone else who is. Justin, I'm quite happy. Again, I had him from the start, so that's quite nice. So he's another dirt cheap one.
You have to go again, isn't he?
Well, you say that. Talking to Sam Martin, so Mr. Inside Leicester, who thinks that when they're all back, he'll be playing one of the back three. So and they'll switch.
But still back five, will they?
Back five. Well, yeah, back three,
yeah.
But he'll play one of the centre backs, so he'll play left or right centre back. So maybe again, I'm not getting rid of him until he's not selected for a game.
He's been, I think in all fairness, these have been really good short-term picks. And I called the team sexy at the start, but actually looking at the first 4 names you've mentioned, Ramsdale, Mitchell and Justin, 3 of those for me are transfers waiting to happen.
One of them, I agree with one, but yeah, that's fine. But they were placeholders for budget players. So I always knew I'm looking for the budget players. And actually, Justin and Mitchell were guaranteed, and Ramsdale was playing for arguably the best budget defence last year.
I agree with that.
They're not the same team. God knows what's happened there. And then my final defender is Lamptey, so 2.5. So I think my total, if you ignore Trent, who's a lot, but those 3 other defenders come to a total of about 7.1 or 7.2 million. So about the same price as Salah, and they've outscored Salah. So I'm quite happy with that.
And Lamptey runs very fast as well, remember?
Very, very fast. And he's going to get more points than your goalkeeper.
Go on then, into midfield.
Fishing in again.
I've got to be fair, your midfield and attack is pretty sublime.
Well, this is where patience comes in. So I've got Salah, Bruno, KDB, Kane, and at the moment I've got Foden and Greenwood. Now I think, actually if KDB's out this week, great, because then Foden's almost guaranteed. And Greenwood, I just think is a very good price. That being said, we've talked about a 2.3 million midfielder for West Brom. So Diagano, I think it is, who could come in. There are other people in that price point that are quite attractive as well. So that they are sort of placeholders. And the reason I've actually got Foden is because of your team at the start of the season. And you gave me a great argument for I don't really care, because they're there for the long haul, not the short haul. So I wouldn't have had Foden, was it not for you? I would have had another one. That would have been another transfer. But I'm quite happy with the transfers I've made, because I've had Werner went to Kane, Aubameyang's gone to KDB, and Tierney's gone to Lamptey. So I've freed up cash, and I think I've got 2 upgrades and 1 downgrade in the process. So I'm pretty happy with that. At least I got one of Kane's hauls. So I got 15 points for him last week. So that was good. So relatively comfortable. Like you say, there's a few, if I have to transfer Ramsdale, Mitchell, Justin, and then one of Foden or Greenwood, there's only 4 more transfers. And that's me having only used 7 to have a team I very much like. So, and just for a bit of hope for people, albeit it didn't work out like this, I was looking at Carl's rank very, very, very enviously, thinking, oh my God, I'm only 16 points behind. So that's Kane's points from last week. So 1 transfer, and I could arguably be there. But I remember having this debate with you, Andrew, last season, when I think I was only 10 points behind you with 3 extra transfers on you. And yeah, that just didn't end well for me, did it? So, so I think, so I'm happy with it. But the one thing is, I'm a very reactive player normally. But because of FPL and my approach to price changes, all my reactiveness, not that I actually think it's reactive, my really super proactiveness, I would say, rather than reactiveness, is getting rid of all of that pent up, I need to make a transfer out of rage, on chasing price changes early, which is enabling me both in Sky and Telegraph to kind of sit back. And that's absolutely necessary to the previous comments and questions. So I'm feeling very zen.
Very, very
as
nice.
You say, next international break, I'll be, what happened, Luke? You've used 14 transfers. Yeah, well.
Bit of a meltdown, indeed. No, it's looking really nice. And your plan is to lose less than 10 by Christmas, or 10 by Christmas, roughly?
10 by Christmas, I'm on target. I'm aiming for 8. I think it's 8 would be Ramsdale, Mitchell, Justin, which I think are necessary. Foden and Greenwood to potentially other people.
Foden. I do agree with Greenwood, but I think Foden is season keeper. I just leave him because as soon as you take him out, and he's got massive holes in him. Foden. He's got 20-point holes in him. You just have to stick with him to catch him.
Can I just get a little bit of a sob story out here?
Yeah, go on, why not?
I feel I've had my bad luck for this season, different format, but in Telegraph, in FPL, I started with Son, and then KDB was going to go up in price, but thanks FPL Towers for locking him, so I sold Son for the 4 goals. I then got him back in on the wild card, brilliant, 1 point, and didn't get him back in, lost another haul, and then so basically for Son, I've taken him out twice for hits. I missed both hauls. I got 3 points in it, and I missed out on 44 points if you add in the hits on that. So I feel I've had my bad luck. So
this is why you're zen. This is why you're zen in TFF.
Well, I've got to be, because I've dealt with it. It's I made 0.2 million profit, so it's all worth it. Those 44 points. Different format. Anyway, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Can I just sort of say I love your team, Luke. I think it's, especially that you've hardly used any transfers, it's just got such a beautiful feel and look to it. And yes, there's 4 players that you've identified that issues may come up, but one of the perfect things I think you mentioned is you'll have to deal with them some stage, but you'll have more information about other players to bring in. There's a few players you've already mentioned Costner of Aston Villa, there's Zuma of Chelsea, but you'll have more information when those people will go out. And your top 6 and TAA, you could sort of say they're just staying there for the whole season, basically.
Yeah.
So you'll never really, unless someone gets run over, you're never going to change most of those players. So you're really well set.
That's very kind. There's an implosion bound to happen now.
But in the second half of the season, when we get these 4 for 1, just attack, can't you? And that's where you make the real ground then. Second half. So moving on to my team. So I've got Meslier in goals. I was very bullish in pre-season, both on this podcast, I believe, and in our WhatsApp groups and whatever else. He did start. He had a bit of a stinker for a couple of games, but then he's performed well. Leeds haven't looked good at the back. The 2.1 million, personally, I don't mind. I'm happy to leave him. So mentioned Mendy for Chelsea for 3.5. There's a lot of even Ramsdale 3.3. I'm saving over $1 million there, so I don't really mind. He scored 8 points in 4 games. He scored 60-70 points over the season. To be honest, I'm happy leaving him there. My back 3 at the moment. So as part of my panic, I took out Phil Bardsley, Robertson, and Alexander Arnold. I brought in Saiss. So I did start with Tierney and Doherty. So I've got Tierney and Doherty, which doesn't look pretty. And I've got Saiss. I'm happy with Saiss. Tierney, you mentioned Gabriel at 2.8, who I do agree is a good option. Tierney's only 0.4 more. He does carry a lot more attacking threat. So I'm quite happy holding on to Tierney, even though Arsenal's next 3 are horrible, as you said. After that, they're really good. And Doherty, as I say, the next 4 Spurs are nice. Not sure how many he's going to start. It was actually on this day when I had my meltdown. So Kane scored in the 4th minute off a Doherty assist against Newcastle, and I was jumping up and down. Come on, assist. Hopefully a clean sheet. Let's kick the season off. Disallowed, and then obviously Wilson scored that penalty in the last minute, which just kind of it was just sort of it that was the start of the mini meltdown. Which then, when obviously Vardy scored all those points, Foden, De Bruyne didn't. It was just like thing after the other. But anyway, the next 4 games are nice. I'll evaluate after 4 games. Saiss, I think we've all agreed, a really nice pick as long as he keeps his place. He looks really cheap. Then got a midfield of De Bruyne, Fernandes, Foden, Salah. So those 4, really, really happy with. They're not going anywhere. Probably, most of the season. I did bring in Cleek as part of my meltdown because he's the penalty taker for Leeds. 3.3 million. He's very cheap. I'll just leave him in there for little bit, so he does. So that's the 3-5, and then the 2s. I've held on to Werner all this time, and I brought in Jimenez, which I missed all his hauls last year on TFF, and I was very excited for this run. That home game against Fulham was a perfect game for him to get a couple of goals, and he hasn't done it yet. But Wolves fixtures for the next month are very nice, so I'll probably leave him there, even though I could get Kane, could get Donald, all these other options. But I was looking at my team this week using 5 transfers and my position. I'm like 75k. I'm absolutely my worst start I can remember in 20 years of TFF. At this point, I'm normally around. I think my worst position ever at this point is probably 12 or 15k. No way ever been this. I'm a bit in uncharted territory. How to react? But like I say, I don't think it's the worst team. Certainly, it's missing though. It's missing Kane, Son. It's missing those kind of players. But what I'm hoping is that everyone around me are reacting, bringing in, packing their teams with Everton, Villa, West Ham, wherever else, and taking out players like Bruno, Bruyne, Salah, Odin, maybe, Campbell, and kind of have the last laugh. But it's very tough at the moment. Carl, what are your thoughts on? Please be gentle. What are your thoughts on my team at the moment?
Yes, I think you've got a couple of good players in there somewhere.
Oh, thanks, mate.
It looks fine. To be honest, I quite like your goalkeeper because he's 2.1. I think you took a gamble, and I think it's paid off because at the end of the day, he's playing, and at a budget level, unless you're going for one of the top teams, you're just hoping for 6 clean sheets, 7 clean sheets will be a very good return, and I can see Leeds doing that. So I think that's a good pick. Wolves are a bit of a funny side this year, and I've never been the fan of their attacking threat, even though they've got good players. I don't think they score lots of goals, and without knowing his price, players like that, Raider up front. I had him. I got rid. I think he's a good player. It's how quick will Chelsea gel? So I think. I'd keep him in your position, and you're strong in midfield. There's just a few little tweaks you need to do that you've mentioned. I think Tierney's fine. Doherty's, keep your eye on. Klitsch and Jimenez would be my main issues. Apart from that, you then start looking at others. You go, yeah, I'm quite happy. Doherty, maybe. Wait and see. Spurs looking on the up. Do those two. You could be flying up.
It's
not too bad.
I wouldn't panic. I mean, I've just looked at one of the leagues we're in. You're only 40 points behind me. So whatever that is, 60,000 places is 40 points. Like that's nothing. Over the effort, give it 2 rounds of FA Cup transfers, you will make up 40 points with 4 transfers. So I think Werner, I think if he bombs this week, he's got to go, right? Because that's a lot of money in a forward. You could get a better price, defender or something that could do better than that.
I think he plays before Kane as well. I think so.
Yeah, see, that would be a nice move. I mean, if you use you don't want to use the Doherty if he's playing, but actually, if you saw that Doherty's not in the team sheet and you need that money, that would be a very easy switch. Klitsch I actually quite like because while I'm rooting you for Meslier in goal, because I think Leeds were lucky to keep the clean sheet they had, but they are a very, very attacking team, and a penalty taker and a very, very attacking team is no bad thing. And Jimenez, I hope I'm right on this, but I'm pinning quite a big hope on him as captain in Sky in my teams in Sky. So he's got good fixtures. Next 3 fixtures for them are good. So, and I think you were talking about it on the Sky pod that he's never explosive, but he'll have 170 points at the end of the season, no doubt about it. So he will tick along, and he might not be in great form, but actually eye test wise, he's looked pretty decent in my opinion. It's not like he's missing chances or anything like that. So I think it's not as bad as you think. I think Doherty for me and Werner, those two transfers, if that enabled Kane and a good defender, I think your team then looks very good. Bearing in mind you've got 4 of the same midfield as my 5, so I can't say it looks terrible.
No, like I say, and I'm really glad we've done this podcast, because I've been scared to even kind of look at my rank, just knowing those kind of horror moves I've made. I haven't got Alexander Arnold, for example. I haven't got Robert, whatever else. But actually looking at it, there was thought in the moves. I didn't just like put a pin in it, right? So Jimenez did have nice fixtures, and he still has for a fair few games, right? So he could come good. Click, as we said, also 6 of those front 7 should be on penalties for all their teams as well. There's only Foden there who's not on penalties. All the rest are as well. The other 3 have all got a attacking threat in defence as the cheapest player in the game. So there's thought there. So sorry, go on.
I was going to say no. I know. I think you're fine. I mean, a thought has just occurred to me, because I know what I think in some other formats. So I'm hoping the way we've kind of gone through our teams, people kind of understand that we're going in a bit more depth on the players that we've each got, because there's reasons that will resonate with people. But I mean, I would be very interested in the listeners' views on whether we're focusing too much on our own teams, because I think we've all talked about players in more in wider terms than they're just in our players, and justifying them, which isn't necessarily applicable in some of the other formats. But I would be interested in the feedback, because I know I can talk.
Fair point. Okay, so we did have some final questions. We had a lot from Simon Baldock. So we'll just run through these. I think hopefully we've answered them, but we'll see what we do. So with the goal fest, should we be going forward heavy formations now, such as 4-3-3, thinking Brewster here, or 3-5-2? So firstly, Carl, can I come to you on that one?
Yeah, it's well, I've talked a little bit about this. I'm much more moving towards 3-4-3 myself, but not Brewster. I haven't even looked at Brewster's price. I'm sure he's dead cheap. The problem is Sheffield United haven't been scoring many goals at the moment. He hasn't played yet, so it'd be a wait and see. But there are a lot of cheaper strikers from the teams, and the league looks really strong. So I'm tending more, for the first time ever, I must admit, over the last 3 or 4 years, every format I've been really heavy at the defence. So I feel a bit nervous, but 3-4-3 for me.
And I think with Brewster, so he's a really good option in FPL, because you have to max out your 15 and you can stick him on the bench. And he's got that home game this weekend, Fulham, but after that, Sheffield United have got a lot of strikers as well, actually, and a few of them are injured. So, Luke, can I ask you? Sorry, go on.
Can I just say on the Brewster one? Brewster is 3 million, right? Off the top of my head, I can list 20 players that are better value picks than Brewster. So unless he's playing regularly and you're playing 4-5-1 and he is your only striker, there is 20 players at that price that are better picks than Brewster in my head. I'm sure there's probably more like 40 or 50. Don't go there. Sorry.
Oh, no. Think we've already answered this. Should we be considering shifting funds from defence into elite mids and strikers? Or do we think, Carl, so we ask you specifically, Carl, things will regress to the mean norms? We kind of answered that already, I think, in that I think we're going to move more towards cheaper fences, moving more money up. Be careful, not to move it all up, because then, if things do completely regress and it goes back, have to shift them all back. Right? Anything else out there, Carl?
Yeah, well, no, it's funny, because at the beginning of the season, I talked about doing a 5-4-1. But I was sort of saying that the 5 at the back should be cheap, and you go for the more premium further up the pitch. I think that the 2 exceptions were Robinson and TAA.
Yeah.
And as I've mentioned already, I've lost. Well, the rating system has pushed those Liverpool players down, so I'm much more away from the premium defenders.
Luke, can I ask you, should we be looking at form rather than fixtures in the absence of fans in stadiums? What a question.
I've mentioned it already. One bad result doesn't make a team bad. So there are teams that form is completely irrelevant for. So the City team, Manchester teams, I'd argue potentially Chelsea, but certainly Liverpool and probably Spurs. Those 5 teams, I don't think form or fixtures come in. They're good teams in this league, and they are better than most of the other teams. So it really doesn't matter unless they're playing each other for, a few of the big teams in succession. Otherwise, they're all fine. I have always been a fixtures man, but I have learned a lot in the last few seasons that I think the league is more predictable with the bigger teams winning more regularly now. But I say this after 2 teams got spanked who should never have got spanked, so clearly I know what I'm talking about. But I think picking form players is a better bet than picking fixtures, but go for both. So Villa, for example, have form, they have fixtures. So good place to invest your money. So I think if you can get both, get both. I would probably say these days it's rated 60% form, 40% fixtures.
Very concise there, Luke. Planning for transfers. I'm still sticking to my strategy of 10 only by Christmas. What are your thoughts on transfers? So I think we've already again kind of answered this. Luke and Carl are definitely sticking towards 10. I'm gonna try. I think with me a lot depends on the next month, right? So if this next month goes like the first month, I'm gonna be hundreds of points behind in my mini league on the same transfers. I'd never mind being hundreds of points behind if I've got a big wedge of transfers in my back pocket, because I truly think in the second half, an engaged manager's skill will get you back those transfers. But I've got the same or less transfers that the teams will have 100 points more. So at the moment, I think hoping for 10. A lot depends next month and individual player tips. So he still has Havertz and Werner and Alexander-Arnold and Robertson for Liverpool. He's also bringing in Salah on this weekend and planning more Man City players from game week 9. Do you have any player tips that we should be looking at aside from the obvious ones, Son, Kane? So I think we mentioned Ollie Watkins is potentially someone I'm tempted at looking at. I think we mentioned potentially Villa, Brighton. Any other tips, Carl? Anyone you've got your eye on who you would advise to bring in over the next or two?
Well, remembering back from the fixture ticker, some Brighton players, more play up front, takes penalties. Trossard, we haven't sort of talked about him, but
3.5. He's very cheap.
He's talk of the town on most formats.
Yeah.
The Villa players, but yeah, you should be really trying to pick out the cheap value players that give you the freedom to go for the big players that he mentioned, and those are a lot down to personal choice. But there are a few knocking around, and we sort of talked about most of them. I would give a little bit of weighting as well towards the Villa players, not just because of the, I would say Burnley as well, but they haven't done very well because they've got that extra game to catch up on. So if you're going to just stick an enabler in there, at least get an extra 2 points and then playing the extra fixture.
And any finally from you, Luke? Any gems you can think of at them?
I mean, I think we've talked a fair amount. I think the Villa boys are priced very well. I think it's that sort of 2.5 to 3 million range. So Gabriel, I talked about him earlier. I think those are the ones that I'm looking at. And then I think just, again, I think we talk a lot about value and that's great. But I think that the key thing to remember is it doesn't matter what you spend. It's about your team's points for the 50 million. So even if you only spend 45 million, you get no prizes for that unspent 5 million. So it's about the most points you can get. But I think personally, my tactic is load myself up with about 4 very good value players and just ram it full of premium players that are on form, and use the transfers on those premium players as the fixtures change, and the 2 or 3 for ones. So I think I've talked about the real value one.
Slight technical error. It looks like Carl and Luke have switched places temporarily just at the end. We had a bit of a technical glitch there. Anyway, yes, Luke, you said you have a really good player, and all of a sudden your mic went off funny.
Yeah, so it might be to do with the guy's name. So I am keeping my eye. So there's a guy called Kilman who plays for Wolves. If he keeps his place, is 2 million. So he is the cheapest player in the game in a good team's defence. If he plays this week, right, there's my Mitchell replacement, and I get a 0.1 saving. But it's an if. So watch this space on that guy.
So I think that Marcelo is that 2.7 million. I think he's the one they signed, and that everyone assumed would be playing that position. But someone started ahead of him, didn't he? In terms of my list, everyone we've mentioned really is kind of on that list. I'm very tempted to look at Ollie Watkins based on their next 5 or 6 really could be a potential value pick. Kane and Son are fairly obvious. Their fixtures for the next 4 are really, really nice. Potentially a mix of Kane and Watkins. I don't know. I've got some decisions to make before this weekend, and I'm sure enough to see how that goes. But this is the thing now. It's different from other games, TFF, because you can make decisions after every single game. So if someone plays and gets injured, for example, and someone's going to be out for a couple of months, you can immediately take them out for the next game that's happening in kind of half an hour's time. It's why it's very hard to lay out exact. But I'm hoping we've kind of got across in everything we've been talking about this whole podcast is just because the transfers are there doesn't mean you have to, especially in this first half of the season. If you read the guide on Fantasy Football Hub, how to win at Telegraph Fantasy Football, the essence of the whole thing is just stay with the pack in the first half, pack in the second half of the season, when you really get the most value out of your transfer and a lot less variance. As we can see now, I really don't want all our listeners and watchers and all Hub subscribers and everyone else to just jump on all these players, burn through all their transfers, chasing last week's points. Just stay calm, and listen to these guys more than me, because I'm the one who had a meltdown a couple of weeks ago. But even if you transfers now, bear in mind, we're halfway through October. There's only 8 more weeks to Christmas, or 9 weeks to Christmas, whatever it is. It's not that long to get to your 10 to 12 transfer target. Don't worry, don't go completely destroying your team. But have some fun as well. If there's a player or two you really want in, or a player or two you really want to get rid of, just do it. As long as you're not burning through 25, 30 years by Christmas, just for the game. So that's helped a little bit. That. Finally, we're just going to have a quick look at the top of the Fantasy Football Hub mini league, the £200 members league. In 10th place, we have Alan Burberry, the Knights. In 9th place, Roger Morgan. In 8th place, Andrew Garment. In 7th place, James Ingram. In 6th place, Mark Rose. In 5th place, Adrian Brooksbank. In 4th place, Forzy Salabucks. In 3rd place, Paul Jamieson. In 2nd place, Roger Morgan again, so he's 2nd and 9th. He's having a good season. And also actually 1st, Forzy Salabucks is actually 1st and 4th. So his first team is in 702nd position overall. He's got 216 points, and he actually didn't have a great week last time out. He only scored 37 points. He must have got off to an absolute flyer. So many congratulations on that. Forzy and Roger also going well there as well. I did notice, Carl, I think you were actually 13th this league as well, I believe. You're not on the leaderboard because we only pick up the top 10. I did notice you were 13th. So well done, Carl, and well done to everyone on that leaderboard. You've all got off to really good starts. Okay, and that is it from us in this mega long episode. We'll try and keep it under an hour, like we say every single month, and we're absolutely nowhere near as we close in on 10 past 11 now at night. But just to say, But many thanks, as usual, Luke and Carl, for all your time, for all your wisdom and your insights and your chat and your thoughts. Superb as usual. You really calmed me down. I'm hoping that you've given all our listeners something to think about in terms of their own teams and managing their team going forward. Not panicking, and that if they want to make transfers, the kind of players they want to get in. Thank you so much for our loyal watchers and listeners. They're great questions and comments. We really, really do appreciate it. We'll be back next month in national break, very likely doing another one. Luke, where can people get hold of you?
Predominantly on Twitter. So my handle there is FPL_equation. I'm also in a fair few sort of Facebook fantasy related groups as well. So you can probably find me on there as well.
So thank you, Luke. And Carl, where can people get hold of you?
Probably the best place would be Twitter, Darkest Jungle. But yeah, I'm not a big social media person apart from that.
And my Twitter handle is at Fergie222. So this video recording will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and TFF YouTube channel, with the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. If you liked what you watched, please press the like button and remember to subscribe to the channel at the bottom right hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast, leave a comment. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok are at FFH_HQ. So please follow and feel free to ask any questions. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you'll find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta-stats, top player team reveals and much, much more, all of which on our new free app from wherever you get your apps. Searching for Fantasy Football Hub. As I mentioned earlier, Sky Planning Maestro Ian Parrin has built a TFF transfer planner for Hub members, and for premium members we also have our dedicated TFF WhatsApp group. If anyone's interested in that, all the links are in the description below to sign up. We will be back in around a month's time, where hopefully we will have made some more progress to look at some emerging players and plans for the following month. See you then, and good night all.